have been removed. And that does seem to make it easier for the virus to latch on to something called the ACE2 receptor, which is basically what it uses. That's the key, and the lock is the receptor, and it uses that to get inside the cells. So the key seems to fit that much more neatly.
Okay, Storm, any calls?
We've got a doctor here who's a bit like Dr. Hillary.
Phone lines and speak to Sue from Hampshire, who has a question for Dr.
She loves the bullshit.
Question, Sue.
I'd like to ask Sarah if there's any chance my husband could get his vaccination slightly earlier. He's 79, and he has...
Listen to this, what a shame. It's a crying shame.
And I know that there's several people that are over 80 are very well that have had the vaccination, but it seems so unfair. My husband has to wait until he's 80.
Let's ask Sarah.
So, Sue, you raised a really important point about people who are on dialysis. We know that people who were diagnosed or told that they were clinically extremely vulnerable should be right at the top of the list immediately after the over 80.
One of the favourite words, we know.
Be right at the top of that list, and I would hope that he should be getting it very quickly, because unfortunately, Sue, as you so rightly say, I'm sure you have been shielding to protect him, because he is very likely. The good news is that the vaccine is now being rolled out in a lot more general practices, lots of wonderful nurses and healthcare assistants doing it. We hoped for 280 practices to be giving it, or practice hubs to be giving it, out of a total of 1,000. In fact, there are only enough supplies for about 100, but from this week, that should be increasing. I would have a word with his practice and see where he is. You may well find, if he's 79 and is on dialysis and has heart failure, that he may be due a vaccine very soon indeed.
Thank you, Sue.
God, he may be due a vaccine very soon indeed. See, you can't live unless you're getting shot up with a vaccine.
Yeah, do you know, I wanted to ask you...
Even in your 80s and 90s.
My mum yesterday actually asked me to ask this to you, so it's okay me sharing this. Yesterday morning I got a call from her doctor saying, was I able to book her in for her vaccine this week? And you know, before I've been so pro-vaccine, I would have had her rushed into that GP this week and no questions asked. But now, because of all the different conspiracy theories about we haven't waited long enough to test and what if there are side effects, I'm just a little bit paranoid. So she's 88. She has angina and arthritis.
Conspiracy theories and paranoid, eh? Just for questioning.
Should I be taking her in? I know that
we're all a bunch of morons, aren't we? I must be both.
Question at all, and I'm really glad you've asked me, because so many of my patients have been asking it too. So the answer, from my perspective, there's the science, and the science shows very clearly that this vaccine has not been rushed out. It's gone through all the regulatory processes, but there are lots of reasons why we're able to get it quicker.
Bill Gates read out the science.
The genetic blueprint of it in January, made available to every scientist in the world. Secondly, there were no delays in getting financing for studies because every government wanted it.
About reducing the population 10 or 15%. There's your science.
Other viruses, whether it was MERS, SARS, rabies, Ebola.
No one will question that, will they, these people?
All of that work was brought together to speed up developing the new vaccines because we had the research already. Then we had hundreds of thousands of people ready to go, so we didn't have to wait to include people or to recruit people to trials. And then, of course, we had lots of people...
Reminds me of that Dr. Hillary, she does, eh?
...for the vaccine trial to prove that it was effective. And then finally, two more points. One is that the MHRA, which is our regulatory board...
Comes on Lorraine, doesn't it?
...looking at the backgrounds to the studies, was looking at all the work that had been done since June. It basically put everything on hold so that it could look at this in the right amount of detail, but in a shorter amount of time.
Thought it was worthy of grabbing my camera, eh?
Vaccine companies have said, look, this
first record there.
urgently, so even if...
Because I've heard her chatting some shit before.
The vaccine trial, rather, doesn't succeed, we're going to make the virus vaccine anyway, and therefore we'll assume that it'll work, and we can just get rid of it. We will destroy the vaccine if it doesn't work. All of those things have come together to allow...
No, you won't. You probably send it to a third world country and just shoot them up with it anyway.
We've had 44,500 people on the Pfizer vaccine. My dad, and this is probably what you really want to hear, My dad is getting his first vaccine on Wednesday, and I could not be more pleased.
There we are, Jasmine. Is that put your mind at rest?
Well, there you go.
Yeah, it's reassured me somewhat. You know I shouldn't listen
Her
to
dad's
it.
getting
There's
it.
so much chatter
So,
out there on the internet, and
you know, you're all buzzing.
family, so it's reassuring, and thank you for that. I will book her in.
Okay,
Oh my lord, can you believe that?
Here's the number to talk to Sarah and ask her
It was
questions.
reassuring, so book her in.
Dawn, you've got one.
Convinced by a fucking couple of minutes of a chat based on a vaccine. Can you believe that?
My mum was concerned when she heard this morning that the vaccine now, because the country...
Yeah, my parachute will work, so your parachute will work. Fucking shocking.
You know, if they're in their 80s, they will still be getting
Absolutely shocking.
There's not going to be an issue with it being stuck at the channel ports.
I'm a medical expert, I hope. I wish I knew about transport, but I do know that this is something that the government, ironically, it's one positive thing about Brexit, that the government had already been looking at medication supplies and routes in, and if necessary, RAF planes were going to be on standby to bring essential medical supplies in. Now, I still worry about supplies of all medications because there are so many, but I do know, particularly with things as they are at the moment, this is probably going to be their number one priority. And if they have to use RAF planes to bring the vaccines in, I think that's probably what they'll do.
Stormy, you got a question?
Yeah, well, we've got some
Well, they should just ask Bill Gates. She'll get the answer straight off him.
What should people with autism
He's the vaccine king, isn't he?
for Christmas to try and stay safe?
Running the show.
Linda, this is a really important one because, of course, so many people with autoimmune conditions were clinically extremely vulnerable, were told they were, they've been shielding, they haven't been seeing anybody.
God, all these terminologies
You need to
are...
bear in mind two things. The
I
first
can't
is
stand them.
that if you're on medication that suppresses your immune system, you are more likely to have serious complications, I'm afraid. But also, we are very aware
I've yet to see the
that
pandemic.
the mental toll on people who have been isolated has been absolutely huge. Now, I hope if you live alone, you've got somebody that you could bubble with, but if you are living with one
Bubble.
other person,
Fucking bubble at
I
Christmas.
think that even if
Would
you're
you believe in
3 or
2020, eh?
2, so you are technically allowed to bubble over Christmas, my personal feeling is you should be high up the list for getting the vaccine. Please don't risk it. Don't go outside your own household that you're in at the moment. But if you're not with anybody else, please don't be alone.
I just want to ask you about bubbling.
God, what an horrible
Sarah.
bitch.
As I understand, it is the one area.
Wonder how much
which
she's
allows
being
people to
paid for
have
push of
Christmas
shit.
with somebody else if they are bubbled. But there are some restrictions. You've got to be bubbled with a single house.
I won't be bubbling, I won't be social distancing, I won't be wearing a mask, I won't be doing any of your shit.
So the answer is that you can't bubble if you are already bubbled with somebody who is in tier 4, then yes, you can continue to bubble with them. But do be aware, of course, that if they're in tier 4, they're likely to be at higher risk. If that family, if you're with a family who is not in tier 4 and they're planning to have a Christmas bubble rather than a social bubble, there cannot be anybody from tier 4 coming into that bubble. So you do just need to bear that in mind as well. But really important that although we recommend that if you're in tier 4 and you're bubbling, you should stay local if you can. In theory, you can bubble with somebody in another tier and you can even stay overnight with them.
Stop.
We're going to go back to the phones.
You can even stay overnight. Oh,
Question about care homes.
why don't we be so grateful?
I just want to know if you think this new strain is going to make the visiting, ability go on even longer, because I've not seen my husband since March the 12th. Apart from July the 3rd, I went in the garden and saw him, but he got very upset because I had a mask on and everything else because he's brain damaged. He had a stroke Christmas Day 3 years ago, and I was told he was going to live 3 to 5 days, and he's still going.
Sorry to be crude, folks, but the only strain I'm getting fucking see this year is when I'm sat on the fucking box training.
It's just so distressing, and all he wants,
And that's rare.
I FaceTime him once a week, is crying because he wants me to go in and sit with him and hold his hand.
Yeah.
And I'm terrified that this thing, this new strain, is going to stop it, because they were talking about getting an injection that I could have, a test, and half an hour later, if I was clear, they'd let me go
Some
into the
people are
hospital.
absolutely wrapped up in it, aren't
So
they?
you're in Sussex, which may be important. Sarah.
So you've raised so many important points, Susan, about people who are in care homes who haven't been able to see loved ones over a long period. Now, a lot of care homes are now putting services in place so that they have, for instance, plastic screens, or you can see people through windows. I know it's not quite the same, but it does make a big difference. If you're not in Tier 4, and not all of Sussex is in Tier 4...
Says it like it's normal.
No, I'm Tier 2.
Plastic screens and shit. That's what you do when you visit bloody people in prison, isn't it?
Then actually, this new swab, it's not an injection, it's a swab, and it's called a rapid access, a lateral flow test. And what you can do is, if your care home's got it, hopefully, you can take that swab, and half an hour later, if that swab is clear, you've got a good, and not 100%, but a good chance of knowing that you are not infectious. They're not 100%, however, which is why what we say is you still need to wear PPE, you still need to, you can hold his hand, but you do need to try and keep as much distance as you can, but you would be able
God,
to
she's
see
well
him
pushing it,
face
this
to face,
woman.
not just in the garden.
Look her up, another
So
psycho.
we